I saw my best friend's brother at a gay club, and the worst part was not that he saw me too. The worst part was that he looked like he had been waiting for me. The Velvet Room sat beneath a closed bookstore on West 18th Street, marked only by a red neon sign in the shape of a door half open. I had passed it 3 times before finally walking down the narrow stairs, my hand pressed over the suppressant patch on my wrist like a secret I could hold in place by force. I told myself I was only there to breathe. One drink, one song. 1 hour where nobody knew my mother had spent dinner talking about respectable alpha matches as if my life were a business lunch. 1 hour where I was not Noah Bennett, Mason Whitaker's quiet best friend, the polite Omega who smiled at family barbecues and pretended not to notice Adrian Whitaker standing across the lawn in a white shirt with his sleeves rolled up, looking like every dangerous thought I had ever tried to bury. Inside, the club was all violet light, polished black floors, and music pulsing hard enough to shake the ice in every glass. Men laughed near the bar, couples leaned close beneath clouds of expensive cologne, and the air carried that dizzy mix of rain-wet coats, citrus cocktails, warm skin, and controlled alpha pheromones softened by filters in the vents. It should have felt freeing. Instead, my nerves sparked under my skin. My patch was cheap, the kind sold in bulk online, and the heat of the room was already loosening one corner. I ordered a ginger ale because my hands were shaking too badly to pretend I belonged here with a real drink. Then I felt it, that strange pressure between the shoulder blades that comes when someone is watching you too steadily. I turned toward the upper balcony, expecting a stranger, maybe a bored alpha in a tailored jacket scanning the crowd for someone easier than me. But the person leaning against the glass rail was not a stranger. Adrian Whitaker stood above the dance floor in a black dress shirt, his dark hair brushed back, his silver-gray eyes fixed directly on mine. My first thought was impossible. Adrian did not come to places like this. Adrian attended charity dinners, closed mergers, and family events where his mother praised his future and his father introduced him as the kind of son who never embarrassed the Whitaker name. Adrian was supposed to be straight, controlled, untouchable. He was supposed to be at the private dinner Mason had complained about all week. He was not supposed to be here, under purple lights, watching me with an expression too calm to be surprised. My stomach dropped. I stepped back, bumping into someone's shoulder, and the corner of my patch peeled farther from my skin. Adrian's gaze flicked to my wrist, then back to my face. He knew. Somehow, from 20 feet away, and through a room full of music, he knew I was losing control of the one thing I had come here to hide. 6 hours before those silver-gray eyes found me across the club, I had been sitting at my mother's dining table while she placed a glossy photograph beside my plate like it was a menu choice. The man in the picture was named Preston Vale, 29, an alpha attorney from Boston with a family-approved smile and a future that apparently had space for a quiet Omega who would not ask too many questions. My mother kept saying he was respectable, stable, the kind of man who could give me protection, as if protection and permission were the same thing. I stared at the roasted chicken cooling in front of me and felt my throat closing around words I had swallowed for years. I wanted to tell her that I did not need to be assigned a life. I wanted to tell her that every time she said the word respectable, it sounded like a door locking. Instead, I folded my napkin, said I had a headache, and left before dessert. Outside, the July air felt heavy and wet, the kind of New York evening that made the sidewalk shine even without rain. I called Mason first. He was the person I always called when the world became too loud. The phone rang until it reached voicemail, and his recorded voice told me to leave a message after the tone. I almost laughed, because of course he was at the Whitaker family dinner, trapped under chandeliers with polished silverware and conversations about legacy. Adrian would be there too, I thought, probably seated at the head of the table, calm and perfect, accepting whatever future his parents placed in front of him, because men like Adrian were trained never to flinch. That thought should have comforted me. It should have made the Velvet Room feel safe. No Whitaker would be there. No one from Mason's world would see me walk through that hidden red door. I changed in my tiny apartment on 9th Avenue, choosing a dark blue button-down and black jeans, ordinary enough to disappear in, but honest enough to feel like mine. Before leaving, I pressed a fresh suppressant patch to my wrist and held it there for 30 seconds, counting under my breath the way the instructions said. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different, but because I looked like someone about to make a choice. By the time I reached West 18th Street, my courage was already thinning. I almost turned around twice. Then a couple came laughing up the stairs from below, their hands loosely linked, their faces bright with the simple relief of being seen. Something inside me cracked open at that sight. I wanted 1 hour of that. 1 hour without pretending. So I went down the stairs, pushed open the door, and stepped into the violet dark, never imagining that the one person I had spent years hiding from had somehow arrived before me. The first thing I noticed inside the velvet room was not the music, but the way the room seemed to breathe. The ceiling was low, the lights were purple and red, and the bass moved through the floor in steady waves, like the heartbeat of something huge sleeping beneath the city. I stood near the entrance longer than I meant to, pretending to read the drink menu while my eyes adjusted to the dark. Everyone looked like they belonged to a different version of the world, one where men could lean close without checking who was watching, where laughter did not have to be lowered, where a hand resting on another hand was not treated like a confession. I should have felt invisible there, and for a few minutes, I almost did. A bartender with a shaved head and a kind smile set a napkin in front of me before I even ordered. When I asked for a ginger ale, he did not smirk or make me feel childish. He just nodded and slid the glass across the counter with a slice of lime balanced on the rim. I wrapped both hands around it, grateful for something cold and simple. The air was filtered, but not enough. Under the citrus, leather, rain-wet jackets, and expensive cologne, I could still sense the layered presence of alphas, betas, and omegas moving through the crowd. Most of it was controlled, softened by club systems and personal blockers, but to me it felt like standing beside the ocean during a storm. Every wave touched a different nerve. I told myself I was fine. I told myself the patch was working. Then a sharp warmth pulsed beneath the adhesive on my wrist, and my confidence folded. I looked down and saw the edge lifting, just a thin pale curl, hardly anything at all, but my body reacted as if a siren had gone off. I pressed my thumb over it and turned away from the bar, searching for the restroom sign, somewhere private, somewhere with a mirror and maybe a paper towel I could use to hold the patch down. That was when I noticed him for the first time. Not Adrian, the other one. A tall alpha in a light gray jacket stood near the hallway, watching me over the rim of his glass. His smile was casual, almost friendly, but his attention was too focused. I moved left, and his eyes followed. I moved right, and he shifted his weight like he was considering whether to approach. My skin prickled. I told myself not to panic, because panic had a scent, and scent was the one language my body had never learned how to keep quiet. I stepped into the crowd instead, letting the music and moving bodies swallow me for cover. For a moment, the plan worked. Then someone on the upper balcony moved, and a cooler, sharper presence cut through the room, like winter air under a door. I looked up before I could stop myself, and Adrian Whitaker was there. For one impossible second, the whole club seemed to fall silent around him. Adrian Whitaker did not look like the man who stood beside Mason at summer cookouts, politely accepting lemonade from Mrs. Whitaker while discussing real estate markets and college internships. He did not look like the polished heir whose name appeared in business magazines beside words like discipline, legacy, and promise. Under the balcony lights, dressed in black with his sleeves rolled to his forearms, he looked colder, sharper, and far more real than the version of him I had spent years trying not to want. He was standing with 3 men in tailored suits and 1 woman in a white satin blazer, all of them beautiful in that untouchable way rich people often are, but Adrian was not speaking to any of them. His hand rested on the balcony rail. His posture was still. His eyes remained on me as if the crowd between us did not exist. I should have looked away first. I should have turned, walked calmly to the restroom, fixed my patch, and convinced myself that there were plenty of men in New York with dark hair and silver gray eyes. But my body knew him before my mind could lie. It remembered his voice saying my name across Mason's kitchen. It remembered the clean scent of cedarwood on his coat when he once drove me home during a thunderstorm because Mason had forgotten his keys. It remembered the way his fingers had brushed mine for half a second when he handed me a mug of coffee, and how I had thought about that touch for 3 embarrassing weeks. Adrian tilted his head slightly, the smallest movement, but it felt like a command. My breath caught. The patch on my wrist warmed again, and this time I caught the faintest trace of my own scent rising beneath the chemical cover, soft and anxious, like rain on warm pavement. Adrian's expression changed. Not much. A tightening around the eyes, a slight shift in his jaw, but I saw it. Recognition. Concern. Something deeper that I did not dare name. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and the spell snapped. I pulled it out with clumsy fingers, praying it was anyone but Mason. It was my mother. A message filled the screen. Preston would still like to meet you tomorrow. Please do not make this difficult, Noah. The words blurred. Suddenly the club felt too crowded, too bright, too full of secrets stacked on top of one another. My mother wanted to hand me to a stranger. Mason was sitting at a family dinner, trusting me without question. Adrian was above me in a place he was never supposed to enter, looking at me like he had crossed the city for a reason he could not say out loud. I turned toward the hallway, needing air, needing distance, needing any place where his gaze could not reach me. But the alpha in the gray jacket had moved from the wall, and he was now standing directly in my path with that same easy smile, as if he had been waiting for me to run. The alpha in the gray jacket smiled as if we had already been introduced, as if my panic were just another kind of invitation. Up close, he was taller than I expected, with blonde hair combed neatly back and a watch that flashed under the violet lights. He looked expensive, confident, and completely certain that the space around him belonged to him. "You look lost," he said, his voice smooth enough that anyone nearby might have mistaken it for kindness. I stepped to the side. He stepped with me. "I am fine," I answered, keeping my voice level even as my pulse climbed into my throat. "I just need to get to the restroom." His eyes dropped to my wrist. The corner of my suppressant patch had lifted enough that even I could smell the faint, rain-warm trace of myself leaking through. His smile changed, not wider, just sharper. "That patch is failing," he said quietly. "You should not be alone right now." The words sounded reasonable, almost protective, but something in the way he said them made my stomach twist. I looked past his shoulder, searching for an open path, for the bartender, for anyone who might read the fear on my face before it turned into a scent the whole room could understand. The hallway behind him seemed miles away. The music pressed against my ribs. My mother's message still burned in my pocket. Adrian's gaze from the balcony felt like a cold star between my shoulder blades. I tried to move around the alpha again, but he leaned one hand against the wall beside me, not touching me, not doing anything loud enough to draw attention, only making the world smaller. "Let me call you a car," he said. "Somewhere quiet. Somewhere safer than this." I shook my head. "No, thank you." My voice cracked on the last word. His attention flickered with satisfaction, and my fear rose so fast I tasted metal. Then the air changed. It was not louder. It was not dramatic. It was simply as if the room had recognized a stronger presence and made space for it. The alpha in gray went still before I even turned. Adrian was behind him, close enough now that the cedarwood clarity of his scent cut through the heat and cologne like clean winter air. He did not raise his voice. He did not touch the man. He only looked at him with a calm so absolute it made the hallway feel suddenly quiet. "Step away from him," Adrian said. The alpha's polite mask faltered. "We were only talking." Adrian's eyes moved once, from the man's hand near the wall to my face, then back again. "The conversation is over." There was a pause, thin and dangerous in its silence, and then the alpha in gray lifted both hands with a small laugh that fooled no one. "No problem," he said, backing away. "I misunderstood." Adrian did not watch him leave. He turned to me instead, and for the first time all night, the sharp control in his expression cracked. "Noah," he said, my name lower than the music, steadier than my breathing. "Are you all right?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to be dignified, distant, unaffected. But the patch on my wrist peeled another fraction, and my hand shook too visibly to hide. Adrian saw it. Of course he saw it. He reached into his jacket and held out a clean white handkerchief, stopping short of touching me until I nodded. Only then did he wrap it gently around my wrist, pressing the patch back into place with a care that made my chest ache worse than fear. "You should not stay on the floor," he said. "There is a quiet room upstairs." I swallowed. "Mason cannot know." His hand stilled for half a second over mine. When he looked up, the reflection of violet lights moved across his eyes like storm clouds. "Then we make sure he does not hear it from anyone else." Adrian did not pull me through the club like I was something to be claimed or hidden. He moved beside me, close enough to shield me from the press of bodies, but far enough that I could still choose each step on my own. Somehow that made it worse. If he had acted arrogant, I could have been angry. If he had treated me like a problem, I could have hated him. Instead, he watched the room with quiet precision while keeping his handkerchief wrapped around my wrist, his fingers never tightening unless the crowd pushed too close. People noticed him. Of course they did. Conversations dipped as we passed. A few alphas looked away before his gaze even reached them. Adrian Whitaker had always carried power like a perfectly tailored coat, but here, away from charity dinners and family lawns, I could finally feel how much of it was real. The alpha in the gray jacket had not gone far. He stood near the foot of the stairs with two friends, his smile back in place, though his eyes were colder now. "Leaving already?" he asked, his tone light enough to sound harmless. Adrian stopped. I almost walked into him. "He is going upstairs," Adrian said. "With me." The words were calm, but something moved through the air after them, a quiet boundary drawn so clearly that even I felt it settle around my shoulders. The alpha in gray glanced at me. "Is that what you want, Noah?" Hearing my name from his mouth made my stomach turn. I had not told him my name. Adrian noticed the change in my breathing. His body shifted half an inch closer, not touching, but offering a wall between us. I should have answered. I should have proven I was not helpless. But the music was too loud, my patch was too fragile, and my voice had deserted me. Adrian looked down at me then, and all the cold command in his face softened into something almost painfully careful. "Say the word," he murmured. "We can leave the building instead." That choice, given in front of everyone, steadied me more than any suppressant ever had. I lifted my chin and said, "Upstairs." Adrian nodded once, then turned back to the alpha in gray. "You heard him." The man's jaw tightened, but he stepped aside. We climbed the narrow staircase, away from the dance floor, away from the lights, away from the version of myself that had almost unraveled in front of strangers. Halfway up, I realized Adrian was still letting me go first, still keeping his hands visible, still careful not to turn protection into possession. That should have made me feel safer. It did, but it also made my heart ache with a dangerous kind of hope. At the top of the stairs, a woman in a white satin blazer watched us from the balcony entrance. She was beautiful, composed, and familiar from society pages I had pretended not to read. Vivian Cross, Adrian's supposed future. Her eyes dropped to the handkerchief around my wrist, then lifted to Adrian's face. She smiled like she had just found the answer to a question she had been asking for years. Vivian Cross did not raise her voice, but somehow her silence stopped us more effectively than the music ever could. She stood in the balcony entrance with one hand wrapped around a glass of sparkling water, her white satin blazer untouched by the heat of the club, her blonde hair pinned back so neatly that she looked like she had stepped out of a formal dinner and into the wrong dream. For a moment, no one spoke. Adrian's hand remained near my wrist, still holding the handkerchief in place. But his attention moved to her with a controlled stillness that made the space between them feel colder. "Vivian," he said, her smile sharpened by a fraction. "Adrian." Then her eyes shifted to me, not cruel, not kind, simply measuring. "And you must be Noah Bennett." My name sounded wrong in her voice, too informed, too prepared. I felt my fingers curl against my palm. "I should go," I said, because it was the only sentence my mind could find. Adrian looked at me immediately. "No," the word was soft, but it landed between us with the weight of something he had been holding back for years. Vivian's brows lifted. "Careful," she said. "People might misunderstand." Adrian's expression did not change. "People have been misunderstanding me my entire life." That was the first crack, not in his face, but in the story everyone had built around him. Vivian saw it too. Her smile faded, leaving behind something tired and almost sad. "Your father is still downstairs in the private dining room across town, telling mine that tonight was only a moment of pressure. He thinks you stepped out to clear your head." Adrian said nothing. My heart began to beat faster. Family dinner. Private dining room. Her father. The picture arranged itself slowly and terribly. This was not a normal evening for him either. Vivian glanced at the handkerchief around my wrist again. I suppose he was half right. Heat rose to my face. I pulled my hand back, but Adrian released me before I had to tug. That carefulness made the shame worse. "I do not know what is happening here," I said, hating how small my voice sounded. "And I do not want to be used in whatever argument you two are having." Adrian turned fully toward me. You are not being used. Vivian gave a quiet laugh, without humor. That might be the first honest thing said tonight. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he still did not snap at her. Instead, he looked past her toward a dark hallway lined with private rooms. Noah needs a quiet place to fix his patch. After that, he can decide whether he wants to leave. Vivian studied him for a long second, then stepped aside. Room 3 is empty. As we passed her, she leaned just close enough for only me to hear. Ask him why he really came here. The private room was small, with navy walls, a leather couch, and a frosted window that blurred the violet lights outside into soft ghosts. The moment the door closed, the bass became a distant pulse. I stood near the wall, holding my wrist to my chest. Adrian stayed by the door, giving me every inch of space. That should have comforted me, but Vivian's words had already planted themselves too deep. Why are you here? I asked. Adrian looked at me, and for the first time since I had known him, he did not look perfect. He looked exhausted. Because tonight my family announced an engagement I never agreed to, he said. And when I walked out, the only person I could think about was you. For a few seconds, I could not move. For a few seconds, I could not move. Adrian's words settled into the room slowly, heavier than the muffled bass beyond the door, heavier than the handkerchief wrapped around my wrist, heavier than every careful glance I had pretended not to understand over the years. The only person I could think about was you. I wanted to reject it before it could become real. I wanted to laugh, or get angry, or remind him that men like him did not get to say things like that to men like me in hidden rooms above clubs where nobody from their real lives could see. Instead, I stared at him and heard my own voice come out too quiet. You should not say that. Adrian did not step closer. He stayed by the door, hands visible, shoulders tense beneath his black shirt. I know. That made my chest hurt. Not because it was cruel, but because it was honest. Then why did you? I asked. His eyes lowered for a moment, and in that brief break of eye contact, I saw the cost of his control. Because I am tired of living inside sentences other people wrote for me. I thought of Vivian in her white blazer, of my mother's message about Prestonvale, of Mason sitting somewhere under chandeliers, not knowing that his best friend and his older brother were standing on the edge of something that could break the shape of all our lives. This is not just about you, I said. Mason is my best friend. Adrian's expression shifted at his brother's name, softening with guilt. I know. He trusts me. He trusts me too. Then we are both terrible people. The words came out sharper than I meant them to, but Adrian accepted them without defense. He looked almost relieved to be judged honestly. Maybe, he said, or maybe we have both been quiet for so long that silence started looking like virtue. I hated how much I understood that. I looked away first, focusing on the frosted window where violet light blurred into pale shadows. You said you walked out of an engagement announcement. Yes. With Vivian. Our families wanted it. Vivian did not want it any more than I did. That surprised me enough to turn back. Adrian's mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile. She has known more about me than anyone else in those rooms ever bothered to see. Then why did she tell me to ask why you really came here? His stillness returned. For the first time that night, he looked caught. Because she knew I would not lie to you if you asked directly. My pulse moved strangely, not faster exactly, but deeper, like every beat had dropped below my ribs. So answer. Adrian drew a slow breath. 3 months ago, Mason showed me a photo on his phone. You were laughing in front of a red neon door. He said you had posted it by accident and deleted it in under a minute. My stomach went cold. You remembered the door. I remembered everything. The room seemed to tilt. All this time I had thought he had arrived here by coincidence, a polished secret crossing paths with mine. But he had seen a door in a deleted photo and carried it with him like a map. Before I could answer, my phone began to vibrate in my pocket. Mason's name lit the screen. My phone kept vibrating in my pocket, small and bright and impossible to ignore, each pulse striking against my thigh like a warning bell I should have heard long before tonight. Mason's name filled the screen again and again, familiar letters suddenly carrying the weight of everything I had been trying not to destroy. I did not answer. I could not. My thumb hovered over the green button while every version of my life waited on the other side of that call. Mason laughing in my kitchen at midnight with a spoon in his hand. Mason lending me his hoodie during freshman year because I had forgotten mine in the rain. Mason saving me a seat in crowded lecture halls. Mason telling me his brother was impossible to read. Mason trusting me with the easy confidence of someone who had never imagined I might be hiding a secret this large from him. It was not only that I had kept something from him. It was that the secret had a face, a voice, a name he carried too. Adrian, his brother. The person standing in front of me now, with rain still darkening the shoulders of his coat, and the ruined tenderness of our almost confession still hanging between us. Adrian saw the name before I could turn the phone away. Something passed through his face, not fear, not shame exactly, but the heavy recognition of a debt finally coming due. It made him look older for a second, less like the man who had crossed the city to find me, and more like someone who had already begun counting the people our truth would hurt. "You should answer," he said quietly. I looked at him, stunned by how calm he sounded. As if answering Mason were a simple thing. As if there were words gentle enough to explain why his best friend had disappeared from the party, why his brother had abandoned dinner, why both of us were standing in a locked upstairs room with my pulse still scattered and Adrian's handkerchief tied around my wrist like evidence. What am I supposed to say? The phone stopped. Silence rushed in too quickly, too completely, filling every corner of the room with all the things I had not said. Then a message appeared. "Where are you?" "Adrian left dinner. Mom is furious. Vivian is not answering me either." I read it once, then again, my chest tightening around every word. Mason was still outside the truth, but only barely. The walls were thinning. The careful distance I had kept between friendship and longing, loyalty and betrayal, safety and desire, was beginning to crack from every side. Adrian took one step forward, then stopped himself, as if he remembered that every inch between us mattered now, that even concern could look like possession if Mason opened the door at the wrong moment. "Noah," he said, "I did not come here to put you in the middle of this." A laugh escaped me, small and broken, sharp enough to hurt my own throat. "You remembered a deleted photo for 3 months and came to the one place I thought no one would find me." His eyes lowered. The muscle in his jaw moved once. "Yes. You left your family dinner. Yes. You followed a clue I never meant to leave behind." His voice dropped lower. "Yes. That is exactly the middle." He accepted that too, and somehow his silence made me angrier than any excuse would have. I wanted him to defend himself. I wanted him to say he had no choice, that he had been worried, that he had missed me, that the photo had haunted him the way his absence had haunted me. I wanted him to say something selfish enough for me to hate. Instead, he stood there and let my anger land because he knew he had earned it. I turned away before that could soften me. The small room seemed suddenly too bright, too close, too full of objects that had become witnesses. The half-open window letting in the cold night air, the lamp with its yellow shade, the narrow side table, the glass of water I had not touched, the mirror above it waiting with cruel patience. I looked into that mirror and finally saw myself clearly. Flushed face, wide eyes, collar slightly crooked, handkerchief tied around my wrist like evidence. Adrian's handkerchief. His careful knot. His silent promise. I looked like someone caught between a life chosen for him and a life he was still too afraid to reach for. Someone who had spent years surviving by being easy to understand and was now falling apart because the truth had become complicated. "I need to leave," I said. The sentence sounded simple, but nothing inside me was. I did not know whether I meant leave the room, leave the building, leave Mason's friendship before I ruined it, or leave Adrian before his presence became the one thing I could no longer walk away from. Adrian nodded, but his expression tightened, pain moving across his face so quickly someone else might have missed it. I did not. That was part of the problem. I saw too much of him now. "I can get you out through the back stairs," he said. "No. Alone." The word hurt him. I saw it before he hit it. Saw the tiny stillness that came over him, the way his shoulders settled as if accepting punishment. But he still moved away from the door. He still gave me the space I asked for, even when it cost him. "Then I will make sure the hallway is clear." I almost told him not to. I almost told him that one more kind thing from him would make me weak. But the hallway outside was full of voices, full of Mason's family, full of people who knew Adrian's name and my face and would understand too much if they saw us leaving together. So I said nothing. Adrian reached for the handle, careful and silent, and at that exact moment, someone knocked from the other side. Not loud, not angry, just 3 steady taps that made the room freeze around us. Adrian's hand stopped inches from the door. My heart seemed to forget its rhythm, and then returned too fast, pounding so hard I could feel it in my wrist beneath the handkerchief. My phone lit again, but this time there was no call, only one message from Mason. Do not lie to me. I am upstairs. My breath disappeared. The words blurred, then sharpened, then blurred again. Upstairs. Not downstairs with the others. Not guessing from the chaos. Close. Too close. The muffled music outside seemed to fade until all I could hear was my own heartbeat, the faint hum of the old radiator, and the soft shift of Adrian turning toward me. His face had gone very still. Not guilty, exactly. Not panicked. Ready. That frightened me more than fear would have. Mason had always said Adrian was impossible to read, but in that second I understood him with terrible clarity. He was preparing to take the blame if I let him. He would open the door, stand between me and the fallout, and make himself the villain before Mason even asked the first question. The thought made something twist painfully inside me. I did not want Mason hurt. I did not want Adrian punished. I did not want to be saved by one brother from the other. The knock came again, softer this time, as if Mason already knew we were standing frozen on the other side, as if he could feel our silence pressing back at him through the wood. I looked at Adrian's hand, still hovering near the handle, and then at the handkerchief around my wrist. I should have untied it. I should have hidden it in my pocket, smoothed my hair, steadied my voice, opened the door with some harmless explanation about needing air and finding an empty room. I had lied well before. I had built entire safe versions of myself from half-truths. But Mason's message glowed in my palm, brutal in its simplicity. Do not lie to me. The worst part was that he had earned that too. He had earned the truth from me long before Adrian ever found the deleted photo. My fingers curled around the phone until the edge bit into my skin. Adrian's gaze moved from my face to the screen and back again. Noah, he whispered, and there was a warning in my name, but also a plea. He did not want me to be forced into honesty by a locked door and a brother's suspicion. He wanted me to choose, even now. That almost broke me. Then Mason's voice came through the door, quiet enough that only we could hear it, but clear enough to change everything. Noah, open the door. I know my brother is in there with you. The room seemed to tilt beneath me. Every secret, every almost, every glance I had explained away, every message I had deleted, every time Mason had laughed beside me while Adrian's name sat like a stone in my chest, all of it arrived at once. Adrian's hand slowly lowered from the handle, leaving the choice to me. For one impossible second, none of us moved. Then I stepped forward, my knees unsteady, my wrist still marked by Adrian's handkerchief, my phone still bright in my hand, and understood with a cold, aching certainty that whatever I said next would decide not only who I loved, but who I was brave enough to stop lying to.